The first step is to normalize asset identifiers and deduplicate repeated vulnerabilities so every downstream process can join, sort, and track without guessing. That means preserving the authoritative keys from your inventory system and carrying them alongside more volatile labels like hostnames and dynamic addresses. When two labels describe the same server or container, merge them and pick the identifier that survives redeployments, reimaging, and cloud scaling events. Deduplication should be more than removing identical fingerprints. It should collapse equivalent findings that arise from scanning through multiple network paths or tool profiles. Once normalization is complete, every finding points at exactly one asset record, and every asset can be rolled up across environments, owners, and service tiers. This is the bedrock for honest trend lines and for metrics that compare apples to apples over time.
With the data set clean, group findings by severity, exploitability, and business criticality so the highest risk combinations rise to the top naturally. Severity provides a useful starting sort, but exploitability narrows focus by asking whether a weakness is reachable with plausible effort from a realistic vantage point. Business criticality adjusts the lens again by recognizing that a medium severity exposure on a crown jewel service often poses more real risk than a high severity issue on a transient utility host. When you layer these dimensions, clusters emerge that reveal where to invest the next unit of effort. The output of this step should be a small number of prioritized groups described in plain language, each with a short rationale that explains the combination of severity, exposure, and business importance that earned it a top slot.
Attackers chain opportunities rather than asking politely for a single vulnerability to open the door, which is why you should highlight attack paths that combine multiple medium-risk exposures into a credible route. For example, a permissive internal interface, a stale service account, and a configuration that weakens logging may look manageable in isolation, but together create a path from foothold to privilege escalation with low noise. Build short path narratives that name the assets involved, the sequence of steps, and the observed evidence that proves feasibility. These narratives are not creative writing, they are condensed threat models grounded in current data. When teams see how routine weaknesses compose into a meaningful route, motivation improves and remediation sequences become obvious rather than contentious.
Separating authenticated from unauthenticated discovery is essential for realistic remediation planning because depth and confidence differ. Authenticated findings generally reflect the system's true state, packages, permissions, and configuration drift, while unauthenticated results often highlight perimeter exposures and fingerprintable misconfigurations. Treat the two streams differently in analysis and assignment. Use authenticated results to drive configuration and patch changes owned by platform or application teams, and use unauthenticated findings to guide perimeter hardening, routing rules, or service exposure decisions. Be explicit in tickets and reports about which category a result came from so owners understand the required vantage point for verification and do not waste time proving a negative where only inside the system checks will suffice.
You will build durable credibility with operations when you identify quick wins that reduce broad exposure with minimal disruption. These often include configuration fixes that clarify protocol settings, tighten cipher suites, revoke obsolete ports, or remove unused packages from common images. The art is to spot patterns, findings that repeat across hosts, namespaces, or clusters, and propose a single change at the image, template, or pipeline level that erases dozens of symptoms at once. Quick wins are not only morale boosters. They shift trend lines decisively and buy patience for the longer engineering work that follows. Document them with before and after evidence and note the scope where the change applies so dashboards can display an immediate, believable improvement. Owner-ready tickets are the engine that converts analysis into movement, and they should arrive with context, evidence, and replication steps so the assignee spends time fixing, not deciphering. Each ticket needs a concise problem statement in business terms, the asset identifiers aligned to inventory, a link to the originating scan record, and precise steps to demonstrate both the issue and its resolution. Include environment labels and a reminder of any applicable service level timelines so priority is not negotiated every time. If the recommended fix has options, state them and note the trade-offs so engineering can choose without waiting for a meeting. Closure must require evidence that mirrors the original observation package versions, configuration exports, or authenticated rescan outputs, so verification is fast and defensible.
Flagging service-level breaches is part of honest reporting. An analysis should propose accelerated timelines that reflect real-world constraints. When a critical finding exceeds the allowable age, the report should name the owner, state the gap in days, describe any interim compensating measures in force, and propose the shortest feasible closure plan with dates. If a dependency blocks the fix a vendor patch, a change window, or a compatibility test, state it plainly and elevate the dependency with the same rigor as the original finding. The value is not in shaming teams. It is in creating the conditions for acceleration by making the bottlenecks visible, bounded, and owned. Leaders can help only when they can see what to move.
Dashboards communicate the state of exposure at a glance, but they must show trends, hotspots, and recurring weaknesses with the same identifiers used in tickets and inventories. Trend panes should display aging curves and closure velocities, revealing whether work is keeping pace with discovery. Hotspot views should group by service, team, or environment to surface where attention will pay off fastest. Recurrence tiles should show which weaknesses reappear after closure, so process or automation gaps can be addressed. Image drift, missing tests, or inconsistent deployment practices. Keep the dashboards honest by showing both improvements and setbacks with brief narrative annotations. And resist the temptation to hide volatility. Volatility teaches where controls need reinforcement. Correlation turns scan results from a list of defects into a story about change, incidents, and configuration drift. Tie each high-risk cluster to recent incidents to ask whether exploitation routes align with observed attack behavior and to determine if detection and response shortened exposure. Link findings to patch releases and deployment events to see whether accelerations or delays map to peaks in exposure, and track configuration management records to identify when a baseline change coincided with a spike in a particular weakness class. This correlation is not busy work, it is how you avoid treating symptoms forever. When the analysis shows a causal path change, drift, spike, you can recommend adjustments to pipelines, gates, or monitoring rather than only scheduling more patch sprints. Leadership summaries should extract the 3 or 4 risks that matter most, the momentum indicators that prove the program is moving, and the resource needs that would accelerate closure. Speak in business impact terms, systems, functions, customers, and pair each risk with the action underway and the evidence expected at the next review. Momentum should be visible through declining average age, improved closure velocity for critical items, or the retirement of a recurring weakness class after a systemic fix. Resource needs should be specific: additional engineer weeks to rebuild images, vendor budget for supported library, or schedule relief to consolidate windows across teams. Leaders cannot buy outcomes, but they can fund and sequence the conditions that make outcomes possible, if you ask precisely. For assessors, exports must be parsable and linked to controls and the plan of actions and milestones, POA&M, with stable identifiers so they can trace each finding from evidence to remediation. Provide machine-readable files with asset keys, timestamps, tool versions, policy profiles, and explicit markers for authenticated status. Include a mapping file that connects each finding to the relevant control references and to the POA&M entry that owns the fix. And ensure your file names and schemas match prior submissions so automation works. This small discipline collapses review time because assessors no longer have to reconcile columns, guess time zones, or chase missing keys. Your analysis becomes portable evidence instead of a bespoke report that ages badly. A simple mini-review helps ensure you did not skip the essentials. Normalize the data to authoritative identifiers, prioritize by severity, exploitability, and criticality, correlate with incidents and changes to find patterns, communicate through tickets and dashboards in the same week, and accelerate where service levels slipped by naming owners and proposing concrete dates. This 5-point check becomes muscle memory for analysts and a quick confidence test for managers who must approve the package. If one element is weak, call it out and state how the next cycle will improve it. The integrity of the process matters as much as this month's numbers. In conclusion, the approach is straightforward but demanding. Cleanse the data for truth, layer context for meaning, shape narratives for action, and deliver evidence for verification. When analysis follows that arc, scan results transform from noise into a weekly operational signal that guides teams and satisfies oversight. The next action is practical and time-bound. Schedule a findings readout with the owners and approvers who can move the top 3 clusters. Bring the owner-ready tickets and the short attack path narratives and walk the group from evidence to plan in one sitting. That readout turns analysis into momentum, and momentum is how risk actually falls. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.